1. Blog Talk Radio.
Hi there, and welcome to Book Chatter. I am your host, Stacy Cochran, and we have an outstanding couple of guests with us tonight. First, I'd like to introduce my co-hosts, Holly Christine and R.J. Keller, to the show. In addition to Holly and R.J., we have a couple of guest authors with us on Book Chatter tonight. Craig Lancaster is the author of 600 Hours of Edward. We're going to get to talking quite a bit about that. And then we have an author that I'm going to find out lots of information about tonight. And I don't know a lot about Heather, but Heather Keel is with us tonight. Heather, what's the title of your book?
Fade to Black.
Fade to Black. Well,
Yeah.
Thank you all for joining us here on Book Chatter. Maybe we'll start with Heather because I'd love to hear about your book and your writing. Tell us a little bit about Fade to Black.
Well, Fade to Black is a novella about a werewolf bounty hunter named Sarah Vargas. She is sent to Charleston, South Carolina to kill a couple of vampires that are wreaking havoc in the area. And while there, she learns a secret about her partner Jared's past that could quite possibly destroy them both. That is, if the vampires don't get them first. It is an awesome story for anybody who likes to read the vampire werewolf shape-shifting genre.
Awesome. And Craig, tell us a little bit about your book, the 600 Hours of Edward. What's the story there, and what was the motivation to write it?
Well, the motivation came just about a year ago. A buddy of mine, Jim Thompson, asked me to do National Novel Writing Month, and I spent a couple of days sort of sketching out a story that I sort of came up with spontaneously, and knocked out my first draft last November. So I'm just about to celebrate this story's birthday, and a few months after that, after I edited it and revised it, I released it myself through CreateSpace, and got a little bit of traction with it. And in August, it was picked up by a regional publishing house, and it just reemerged. I mean, the book just became available within the past couple of days.
That's a great story. I definitely want to talk a little bit about the excitement of going from self-publishing the book to having a regional press publishing 600 Hours of Edward. But let's first toss it over to my co-host R.J. Keller and Holly Christine. Holly, what's new with you this week? Anything that you want to discuss?
Not too much on the book side of things. Things have been pretty calm over here. I started going back, and I've been doing a lot of writing, so that's always good.
So what are you working on right now? What are you writing?
Well, I actually, for a while I was working on kind of like a little bit of a follow-up to the Nine Lives of Clemenza that explores this concept of a universal language. I've been obsessed with it for quite some time. But I actually ended up going back to a project that I was working on way before I started the Nine Lives of Clemenza, and for some reason the story just came back to me, actually about a psychiatrist and meeting her father in a very unusual way, and it just came back to me. It's kind of like the voices just changed in my head. They went on strike and decided that they're going to finish this project that I started a while ago, so I just go with them.
Very cool. How far along are you with the project?
Actually, I was almost like 3/4 of the way finished whenever I started. I stopped the project before, and then I started working on the Nine Lives of Clemenza. So I have a lot. I still have a lot to do. I kind of like to take it in a different direction. So I'm kind of starting over from scratch, but there's a lot of good stuff that's there. So it's different. I've never really, I've never really gone back to finish something that. I mean, this was like 4 years ago that I was writing this, so it's kind of different looking at it now.
Do you feel like you're a very different person today than 4 years ago?
Oh, definitely. 4 years ago, I was 24. So my priorities were very, very different. But, as a writer, I feel that I've definitely developed, and I've learned so much even in the past year just with, self-publishing and even just networking. So it's different.
Well,
Interesting.
if I don't remember to follow up on that, remind me to follow up on that here at the as we get into this interview. And RJ, how are you doing this week? What's interesting in your life in the past week, writing wise?
Well, an interview with Andrew Craig did an interview with me that's now live on Backward Books, and it's also a contest to win a signed copy of Waiting for Spring. So if anyone is interested in reading the interview and or winning a copy of the book, then they should definitely head over there. It's Backward, BACKWORD, books.com. So that's what's new with me.
Cool. So what kinds of things did he ask you in your interview?
He asked me, about the writing process, sort of how it got started. He asked me about all the sex scenes in the book, of course, and about the class, not necessarily class war, but class distinctions that are sort of a theme throughout the book as well. So it was a really fun interview, and a lot of really cool questions that I hadn't been asked before, which was really nice.
So speaking of sex, Heather, tell us a little bit about some of the steamy scenes in your vampire romance novel. Is it fair to call it a vampire romance novel?
A little bit, yes. It never gets actually really steamy because Sarah's constantly trying to figure out who changed her into a werewolf. But sparks are definitely flying between her and Jared, her partner.
So tell us a little bit about what she sees in Jared that she's interested in.
Oh, he is bad boy hot. He's one of those guys that you can't bring home to mom, but you really just want to hold on to them anyways. And there's also, a side of him that's really soft and sensitive and has been through a lot. And she can kind of, gosh, I can't even think of the word right now. She can identify
it's getting
with
you
that.
excited. I can tell.
Yep.
So,
well, I started writing the sequel today, so I'm getting, more in depth with their relationship.
So where do you draw your inspiration from?
Oh, from anywhere. My husband's been really inspiring me for years to write. He's the inspiration for Jared. I get inspiration from my son. I get inspiration from music, movies, TV, just anywhere.
And tell us a little bit about how you published the book.
Well, I submitted it to Eternal Press. They are an ebook publisher based out of Canada.
Mm-hmm.
And they accepted it, which was so fantastic because I finished writing this back in 2006. And it didn't get published until earlier this month. So I've been trying to edit it, really, make sure that it was nice and polished. And Eternal Press accepted it, and that was back in May. I can't believe it's already published. It's so amazing how fast it's gone.
So what are some of the things, I know a lot of our listeners for these interviews, are aspiring Kindle authors or ebook authors. What are some of the things that you have tried to do or are in the process of doing to help market and promote an ebook?
Facebook and Twitter have been amazing in promoting my work. I've been blogging, trying to, do as many, interviews and guest spots on other people's blogs as possible. And just really just trying to get the word out there about Fade to Black.
Very cool. If I can shift it over to Craig, let's talk a little bit about your book, 600 Hours of Edward. One of these nicely prepared questions that RJ tossed to me about this, and I think I'm probably going to let RJ ask you some questions as well, since she knows your work really well, is Edward's Asperger's syndrome makes for a very crisp narrative style. Did this make the challenge, or did this make the novel challenging to write?
In some ways, it's written in his voice, and from a writing standpoint, and particularly writing as quickly as I did, it made it easy to sort of slip into him and see the world through his eyes, and that was sort of a calculated thing. You know, I wanted the story to unfold on the ground as he saw it. Now, in the revision stage, I started going through there, and he has a very flat, sort of matter-of-fact tone. And I did a lot of killing out of my own words, you know, where the language would slip in a little more into the poetic. And boy, that hurt, you know, to kill a nicely termed phrase because your character would never use it. That was difficult for me because a nicely termed phrase is a nicely termed phrase, but it just didn't fit.
Right.
And but I think it's part of what makes the character endearing. And I'll let RJ speak to that.
Absolutely.
Since she's been since she's read it, it's you know, I can't tell you how many people have come up to me and said, you know, I wanted to put my arms around Edward and tell him everything was going to be fine. And I can't say that was the calculated response, but it's sure nice to hear people say that.
That's definitely how I felt about him, and I thought, you know, the way you did the narrative, you know, being very, well, not that the narrative was flat, but again, like you said, Edward's sort of way of talking, which is what he's doing in narrating, is sort of flat, and yet you managed to convey so many powerful emotions, even though he didn't, you know, specifically say that he was feeling those emotions, which that's why I thought it must have been so challenging, because it was all absolutely subtext. Because, I mean, not that he didn't get it, I at least that's not the feeling I got, but I thought it was so amazing how you were able to do that while still staying, you know, in his character. I guess I'm more gushing than interviewing, but that's what I came away with from the book, and I was just, you know, so amazed with how you did that. But anyway.
Yeah, well, I lean pretty heavily on show don't tell. You know, I mean, there are a couple, I don't want to give too much away, but there are a couple of moments where he describes what he's doing, and it's a tough scene, and he never really says, this makes me feel this way. He says, you know, I clutched the pictures to my chest and rocked slowly in my chair, you know, and then so, you know, you don't need anybody to tell you what that means.
Right.
And so that's sort of how I did it. I would like to, you know, sort of talk about suffering for art and say it was real difficult, but actually it was real natural to do that. So, you know, but I'm sure I'll suffer later, so don't worry.
We've got a question from the instant message chat. Mina Noir asks, where can I buy the vampire book?
Well, Fade to Black is available in two forms. The ebook is available at the Eternal Press website, which is www.eternalpress.ca, and the print copy of Fade to Black is available on Amazon.com.
So very good, and I want to remind folks who are watching or listening to the show that if you have a question, just as we pulled from the instant message chat, that you're encouraged to post a question over on the instant message chat for any of our authors here tonight. Again, the guest tonight, we have Craig Lancaster. He is the author of 600 Hours of Edward. Heather Keel, who is the author of Fade to Black, which, as we've just learned, is available from the Eternal Press website as well as in paperback in the U.S. from Amazon.com. And, of course, I'm joined, as always, by my wonderful co-host, Holly Christine, who is the author of The 9 Lives of Clemenza, as well as Retail Ready, and R.J. Keller, who is the author of Waiting for Spring. So, R.J., what are the things about Craig's book? I know you had a bunch of great questions. You want to kind of keep that chat going?
Oh, sure. I just when I learned that you first wrote it in NaNoWriMo last November, and then it became available. You self-published it in February. I cannot imagine how on earth did you get it ready so quickly. Well, that seems really, really quick to me. But I mean, do you have some sort of secret?
Well,
it was
no.
really well edited, I thought so.
Well, I appreciate that. I don't have a secret. I wrote. I don't remember what the final word count was when I got done, but in the first 25 days of November last year, I wrote upward of 80,000 words. And, my line about this is always that my wife refers to last November as the month that we test drove divorce. So, I set it aside for a couple of weeks. I was so happy to have done it. It's something I'd always wanted to do, and life sort of intrudes, and my professional path. I always wanted to be a writer, and my professional path took me down in an editing direction. I'm a newspaper editor, and so I was just so happy. So I pretty much just genuflected at the stack of paper for a couple of weeks and didn't even look at it. And then when I picked it up, I really didn't know what I had, and I reread it, and I didn't hate it. It was pretty much the way I remember thinking about it, and so I started in on the revisions. I think my saving grace, I've said this before, is that I'm a pretty ruthless editor, and I'm more ruthless with myself than anybody else, and so,
Right.
And I'm a pretty controlled writer. I mean, I'm nobody's paragon of plotting, and I don't wield the language like a poem, but I sort of naturally rein in excesses. So my edit sessions are not. I'm not cutting off arms and legs, because I never extra arms and legs, I should say, because I don't ever put them in there in the first place.
Right.
So that sped things up. But in its self-published version, I talked about this on the Blood Red Pencil where I was guest blogging this week, and I took 3 or 4 runs at that book block. I went entirely too fast. If I had it to do over again, I would have taken a good 6 months and gotten it just right before I put it out there.
Oh, okay, because the version I read, I think I downloaded it from Smashwords, I think in May or June. It struck me as very professional, like it could have, been traditionally published. So.
Yeah, by then it was in pretty good shape. The one in February was quite a bit rougher.
Right. Okay, I see. But still.
We've got another question from Mina Noir. I'm going to take your question, Mina, and kind of change it a little bit. She's getting in a plug for Night Owl Romance and asking you, Heather, have you ever submitted your book to Night Owl Romance because she is a reviewer for them? Are you familiar by any chance with Night Owl Romance?
I am, and I know that Eternal Press submitted my manuscript to many places for review, so I can contact them and double check, and if they haven't, I can definitely send it by their way.
Okay, very cool. Mina, maybe you can get in touch with Heather after the show through your website. Is that the best way for her to reach you there?
Yes, it is.
Yeah.
My website is heatherkeel.blogspot.com.
Heather Keel, and that Keel is spelled?
Kuehl.
Okay, Kuehl. It's a good question. It also makes me think a little bit about the question of reviews in general, their importance, and how do you get them? Either from Amazon reviewers or from newspapers or from bloggers or what have you. Let's just kind of do a roundtable on that one. So 2 questions. How important or how have reviews factored into the success of your book? And then how do you get reviews? What are some of the things that you've done to get reviews? Why don't you, Holly, start us off with that one. We'll go around for that.
Well, at first, right after I published the Nihilax of Clemenza, I sent my book out. I sent the physical book out, like you traditionally would, to seek reviews. And I did get quite a few reviews doing it that way, but a lot of reviews have come from Amazon readers. And also, I've got a few interesting reviews from Goodreads as well. So both ebook and the actual paperback book, I do think that they're very important. I like using them whenever I'm trying to plug the book on the Amazon, the Kindle forums. To use a quote from a reviewer. I think sometimes it's nice to use a quote from a reviewer because it's someone else's words about your book. There's only, of course, you enjoy your book, but hearing someone else's thoughts on it is always, I think, encouraging to other readers. And I know whenever I buy anything online, I always read the reviews.
Yeah.
Sure. I think it's, I definitely do.
RJ, how about you? How would you rate the importance of reviews in spreading the word about your book, and then what are some of the ways that you've seen that have been most successful at earning reviews?
I think it's definitely, I'd say one of the most important factors, at least definitely in with my book. I've had a lot of people email me who said, I read about it on, Front Street Reviews or, excuse me, or even on the Amazon reviews. I definitely don't discount the power of, the average reader and their words. In fact, if anything, I'd say probably the Amazon reviews have probably sold more copies of my book than the other places. Although, just with Craig's book, I had heard about his on selfpublishingreview.com. So, so as far as finding books as well, I personally, go to the reviews website, the self-published review websites, and that's where I find them as a reader. And I think for the most part, as far as the websites go, I've honestly just submitted it, just like, you would submit to an agent. I have a similar sort of covering letter, and so far I haven't been turned down for any of the websites I've, queried.
That's great.
And it's, just doing it like a straight query is what has worked for me personally.
Tell me a little bit more about the selfpublishedreview.com. I don't think I've heard of that before. What is that?
That is run by Henry Baum, who was on Book Chatter a few months ago.
Right.
He's also one of the founders of Backward Books. And it's basically a website that's devoted to self-publishing, and part of what they do is review books, self-published books, which is really nice. And it's, I think, a really great website, to be honest, just, as far as getting just information in general as well. He had reviews of, indie author and Publitariat Vault that garnered quite a bit of attention a while back ago. And it's a really good resource in general.
And now, Heather, how about you? How would you assess the importance of getting reviews? How important is it to you as an author who is promoting a book, like on a scale of other things that are important in marketing the book, or in comparison to other things that are important in marketing the book? How important is getting reviews, and then what are some of the things that you're doing to try and get folks to review your book?
Well, and I'm just putting myself out there, querying to different online review sites, of trying to get them to review my book. I know Eternal Press's marketing department sent my book out to a lot of different places for reviews. Mm-hmm. And Amazon is a fantastic place to get reviews. I know when I go shopping for a book, that's the first thing I look at is the reviews. Because if somebody says they only have 1 star and that they're all saying the book's not good, I'm not going to bother wasting my time with it. So, reviews are a really important part of, getting your book out there and making sure, that you know what people like.
Now, the Eternal Press is, I think I understood, is a Canadian publisher. Are you actually in Canada as an author?
No, I live in South Carolina.
Oh, well, there you go.
Wow.
Well, that's interesting. Very interesting.
Yeah.
We had a great question that Holly brought up a moment ago. I'm going to toss this over to Craig, unless you have some extra insight into getting book reviews. Holly has a great question for you about ebooks. She'd like to hear your thoughts on ebooks, especially coming from being a newspaper editor.
Well, ebooks, I have not dipped my toe too deeply into ebooks, although I think the one that RJ read was an ebook.
Yes.
That I put up at Smashwords. But I'm really bullish on them because I listened in last week to your show and got the word about Joe Comrath's blog post, and immediately went and read that and thought, wow, this is big. And especially if you got a backlist like he does, it's really big because it's like compounding interest. But I definitely stashed that away. My philosophy is, however people read, thank God they're reading. So I'm pretty much platform agnostic. Now, the publisher that picked me up is they make their big push with printed books. I mean, they're only just now starting to plot an ebook strategy. And I should tell you a little bit about my publishers. Riverbend Publishing, they're out of Helena, Montana. And they're very highly regarded in this region, the Northern Rockies. They do contemporary novels, but they also do a lot of they revive old Western classics. They publish The Man Who Shot Liberty Valance, for instance, even though they're a relatively new press. So they have this regional flavor that's very distinct. But even they are looking at ebooks and saying, "Boy, how do we get into this?" So
Very cool. What other questions do you have, RJ, for Craig?
Well, I was just curious about, did Riverbend pick up Edward because it was self-published, or is that how they had heard about it, or was it rather, through traditional clearing, or how did they hear about it? I'm just curious.
It's a great question.
Well, when I released it through CreateSpace, I confronted the same problem everybody confronts, and that is, okay, how do I distribute this beyond Amazon.com?
Exactly.
And an author that I work with here at the newspaper suggested that I contact Riverbend, that they did some distribution. So I wrote to them and asked about the possibility of doing a distribution deal, and they said, well, send a review copy. So I did, and then I promptly forgot about it, and the weeks and months dragged on, and as the book started picking up a little bit of local traction, I wrote back, and probably in a huge breach of etiquette, and said, I'm still interested in a distribution deal. Maybe I ought to just pick this book up. And
wow.
And then another couple of months dragged by, and I came off the golf course one day, and there was an email waiting for me that said, we love the book. We'd love to do it. So, great.
That's an awesome story.
Yeah, I mean, I was, believe me, I was all for, I think, anybody who's followed my posting history or anything knows that I'm very much a fan of indie publishing, but for me personally, I was all for being put out of that business. So.
Right. Oh, that's understandable. Like you said, distribution is everything. That's probably the biggest challenge for an indie author. So,
yeah. Well, I remember sitting in the sales manager's office a few weeks ago when I was in Helena, and she said, she said, well, we only have, 300 accounts or so. And I thought, God, I just about killed myself doing out of the trunk distribution to 3 bookstores in Billings.
Right.
300 accounts sounds like all the accounts in the world to me.
Exactly.
So that's, yeah. So I'm very happy with the way everything broke.
Right.
You've got another great question here for Craig as well, RJ. Kind of related to, we're talking about distribution and marketing of books. What, if any, tools did your self-publishing experience give you regarding marketing?
Well, it brought me out of my shell. I'm not naturally comfortable with going up to somebody and saying, "Hey, look what I did." But I also realize pragmatically that that it has to be done. And in fact, even if you have a trade publishing contract, unless you're King or King Salver, they're gonna tell you got to get out there and you gotta pound this book. And so that's probably the biggest thing I've learned how to do is take off my normal guy face and put on my self-marketer face.
Right. No,
It's difficult to do.
I'm sorry?
definitely.
It's difficult to do, too. I think as writers, we're generally a little, kind of like private people, even though we, are dealing, obviously, with characters, especially with fiction, obviously. But, I always find it difficult whenever I'm doing a signing or a reading or an event somewhere. I always struggle with, how am I going to approach people that are walking past? And I don't know if there's one method that works solidly. It seems like sometimes if you kind of stay back from it all and or just the quiet person, then that may bring people in, people who maybe aren't interested in speaking back to you necessarily, or maybe coming up with their own question. But whenever you're walking through the mall, I always get so annoyed by the people who are screaming at you to try their hand lotions and the new smoking device. But I think it's a difficult thing no matter what you're trying to sell.
Yeah, I agree. I think now I love the personal engagement once you've gone past whatever event it is that gets you to talking to someone. I love
Right.
that part. But the actual means of getting there, that's tough. It's like book speed dating,
Yeah, exactly.
they drop into a chair opposite you and you try to make a love connection. So
10 seconds.
And it seems like, because I noticed you did the blog tour this week, which
Right.
is really interesting. And I thought that was kind of neat that you still are using a lot of the methods that indie writers are using, even though you have been picked up by a traditional house, which I actually think is great because you're keeping that sort of connection with everyone. With your readers and still doing it sort of the grassroots way, in that way, which I think is really kind of neat.
Well, and I live in a rural state and a far-flung state, kind of place where people, think nothing of jumping in their truck and going 6 hours to watch a football game. And and I have sort of a grassroots strategy for this. And I printed out a list of every public library in Montana, and there's a remarkably large number of them, and I'm going to do my damnedest to get to as many of them as I can. In my town, I have to, which is the, a big regional hub, relatively big. I had to compete with the 14-screen movie theater and all that, but, in Golden Valley County, it could be a real event, and it'll allow me to do what I'm comfortable doing, and that is sort of engaging with people one-on-one.
Right.
Well, let's talk a little bit about, I'm seeing a disheartening message from Amy Rogers, who's separating from us for the night. Amy, thank you very much for tuning in. We'll have to catch up with you.
Amy.
Yeah, no kidding. Oh, it sounds like she's feeling a little under the weather. Well, we hope you get to feeling better, Amy, and have a good night. Let's talk a little bit about, Holly, you mentioned something there. I'm getting the cough sign from Amy Rogers. My heart goes out to you, Amy. I hope you get to feeling better. Have a great night. You mentioned doing a couple of bookstore events. Let's talk about how you set those up. Maybe that's definitely something that I can always learn from. So how did you set up your bookstore events?
Well, I started, the first thing I did was I contacted my local library, and they were incredibly helpful and enthusiastic. They were, I donated one book, and then I decided once I wanted to see how well the book was circulating. So I got online about 2 months later, and I saw that it was checked out. So, I was ready to do cartwheels, and I called into the library to see how many times it had been checked out. And it was checked out quite a few times. So they said, "Are you interested in doing a reading?" They're always looking for new programs. And it's a great way to bring people into the library as well, So it's like both sides are benefiting from doing an event at a library. I also set up with an independent bookstore in the area, and she's been absolutely wonderful with me. She's very supportive, and she's a great name in the community. And I think that, doing that, I haven't done any like Borders or Barnes & Noble or anything like that. I've just kind of kept it a little less corporate. I work for a corporation, so.
Is that by design?
I figure I'm sharing enough with a corporation, so in my writing time, I'd like to not share funds with a corporation.
So, RJ, how about you? Have you managed to do any library or bookstore type events?
Right now, I've no bookstores, unfortunately, although I am definitely working on that. But it is in the Maine State Library, and Waiting for Spring is in the Maine State Library in Augusta. I've also donated a couple of books to my local library. I live in a very small town, 2,000 people. So they are looking into setting up a book club, a local book club for the book, which I'm really looking forward to.
Wow, that's awesome.
I'm really excited about that.
That's really cool.
Fun. That'll be a lot of fun.
That's how the Sisterhood of the Traveling Pants started, I believe. Right?
Oh, really?
Or what? Yeah, I think that's how that all came about, was through either that or it's the Yaya Sisterhood. It's either Yaya or yeah. That's how they got started with, book clubs.
Right. Very cool.
Yeah. You're on your way.
Yeah.
It's official.
Very cool.
Okay.
And Heather, how about you? Have you thought about doing some bookstore events? I know the book hasn't been out very long, Fade to Black, but tell us a little bit.
We've actually been trying to set some up right now as we speak. We've been placing calls into technically any independent bookstore within 20 to 30 minutes of my house. Sometimes even a little further than that. And as a librarian myself, the library is the best place to try to promote your work because librarians talk to each other. And they'll tell other librarians, hey, this is a good book. And then those librarians will purchase your book, and so on and so forth. It's, as I just said, the best way to promote your book and get it out there and try to get more fans is through the library system.
Absolutely. That's an excellent point.
It's one
library. Well, I'm sorry.
Go ahead, Craig.
Yeah, well, not to be, totally craven about it, but, the nice thing about libraries, too, is, that's anything you sell at a signing there is, pure profit once you've cut out your production costs. And, if you're selling at a bookstore, you can say goodbye to 40 to 45%.
Exactly.
So,
good point.
I also donate back to the library. Like I always say, for every copy sold, I will donate $1 back. I sell the Nyla de Clemenza at readings for $10. And then, which you guys know, I publish through Lulu. So depending upon how many books I buy at a time, I'm definitely not, making a lot of money by any means. But I always feel like if I'm buying something and I know that $1 is going someplace else as well, I'm always more inclined. I feel better about the purchase. Like I am also donating, So I think that's a little more incentive. Plus, it gives back to the libraries as well.
I want to remind folks who are watching you are watching Book Chatter. I am your host, Stacy Cochran, and we have on the line tonight Heather Keel, who's the author of the novel Fade to Black, as well as Craig Lancaster, who is the author of 600 hours of Edward. I almost wanted to say 600 days of Edward, but it's 600 hours of Edward, Craig Lancaster. In addition to Craig Lancaster and Heather Keel, we have, of course, my co-host Holly Christine, who is the author of The 9 Lives of Clemenza and Retail Ready, the wonderful, inspiring story of her adventures in the retail industry, as well as R.J. Keller, who is the author of the novel Waiting for Spring, which is, I don't think there's been a negative review of Waiting for Spring, has there?
Yes, there has been. Someone thought it was rather vulgar.
So one person
if you go to Amazon, there's actually it's tagged as vulgar. So I was actually really excited about that.
I know sometimes those kind of negative reviews always end up being, for a lot of people, like an in to buy it. They're like, well, that sounds good, So a negative may always be a positive for someone else.
Well, it was posted, and then it was tagged as vulgar. In my sales, it was a Kindle version, and I sold within the next day and a half. I sold 150 copies just because of that on the Kindle. So
that is awesome.
So I put a little message on the Kindle board thanking the member for having done that for me, and so she deleted her review. It was really funny.
That's awesome.
That is awesome. That's a great story. Let's talk a little bit about writing process. Heather, your novel Fade to Black, how long did it take to write?
Well, I started in 2004. I was in college at the time, and I was taking a creative writing class. And what we were supposed to do was write a short story that was inspired by a song lyric. And mine was a song lyric by the band Sublime. Life's too short, so love the one you got, because you might get run over or you might get shot. So what ended up happening was I wrote the first 3 chapters of Fade to Black in that class, and when I turned it in for our critiquing, there was no end in sight. In 2006 is when I finally finished it. And just, life constantly got in the way, to be honest, and that's when I took so long to finish. But it was an amazing process. Fade to Black is one of the first books I've actually finished. And it means so much to me that it's, available to everybody now.
So did it begin as a short story? Did I understand that correctly?
Well, it was supposed to be a short story. It never was short by any means.
When did you know that you had something that wasn't just a short story, but that you had something that you could potentially turn into a novel? Was there one moment, or was there a time when you said, "Okay, maybe I have something here that's more than a short story," or did it just evolve over several months?
By the end of chapter 1, I knew that I could go on with this a lot further than a short story. Sarah had a lot to say, and she was very angry to the world about everything that happened in her life. And I knew that a short story would never do her justice at all. So by the end of chapter 1, I knew that it was going to take a bit telling her story.
So what is her backstory? What is Sarah's backstory?
Well, Sarah was a typical college student until 5 years prior to Fade to Black, when she was out jogging one night and got attacked by a werewolf. And, clinically she died in the hospital. But because she had already been infected, being a werewolf saved her life. Once she was infected and turned into a werewolf, that's what in the end saved her life. But it's also, in her mind, what ruined her life. She feels like she can't be normal anymore. She feels like she can't, go take college classes or mingle with normal people, because 3 times a month she changes into this really big wolf.
So it sounds like a great sort of alienation story.
Yeah. And, Fade to Black, throughout from the beginning to the end of the book, it's all about her trying to find a balance between who she is now and who she was 5 years ago. And at the beginning of Fade to Black, she hasn't found that balance yet. And to be honest, I'm not sure by the end if she has fully found that balance or not. I'm only a couple chapters into writing the sequel right now, and she still has a long way to go before she's fully at peace.
What's the
That's where
hardest
she is
thing?
now.
You're working on the second novel now. What's the hardest thing in your day-to-day working on the book? Do you just get to a point where you're just like, hey, this is just no good, or are you fairly confident in the book most of the time while you're writing it?
Most of the time while I'm writing it, I'm fairly confident. If I come to a part where I just get stuck and I can't go any further, which is actually what happened when I wrote the first draft to Fade to Black, I turned around and I will read right back through everything I wrote. And usually what ends up happening is I find a part that Sarah would never do that, and that's what got me stuck. The fact that Sarah would never do something that happened early in the book, and it's gone off kilter, so I just kind of tweak that a little bit and fix it, and then I'm back on track again.
Can you give us one example of something that you did in a draft stage that you said, wait a minute, this is inconsistent with her character, and then how did you change that?
Well, Sarah's character, she's a very strong female. She's, very in control of herself for the most part at all times. And in the original draft, I had her infected with a silver compound because, werewolves, they can't stand silver. And it made her basically weaker than a human. And I got to a point and I'm like, okay, she would never be like this. So I went through and just took out that part completely because it was ruining the book.
You say she was weaker than a human physically or emotionally?
Physically.
Okay.
When she's very strong, she's a bounty hunter. She's a go-get-'em girl. She's not one to just sit back and let the men handle everything.
Now, Craig, how about you? What was the lowest point for you in writing 600 Hours of Edward? What was the lowest point, and then how'd you dig yourself out of that?
I have to tell you, this question would probably be more applicable to my second novel, which I just finished at the end of August, because Edward was such a manic, mad dash that I never really hit any hurdles. I might have hit a couple of speed bumps, but nothing that, just caused me to reassess everything.
Well, let me jump in there for a second, if I can. Why were you able to write it as quickly and with the kind of energy? What do you think it was that sustained your energy level?
Yeah, I always trace, it's kind of a process thing, but I always trace the fact that this was the first novel I ever finished to the fact that I wrote an outline, and it wasn't a very detailed one. It was just a couple of sentences per section or chapter, but what it did is it allowed me to know before I ever sat down to write that I had the right dramatic arc, that my exposition was about right, my rising action was about right, my climax was where it needed to be, and all of that. And so then I was writing so quickly and in the voice of this guy that I just, every day I sat down and I knew where I wanted to pick up, and I wrote until my eyes bled and, and picked it up the next day. So, it was a harder slog on the second novel because I didn't write in that way. I actually, moved the story forward. Sometimes it was 250 words in a day, and sometimes it was 3,000. So it gave me a bit more time to contemplate some of the corners I boxed myself into.
Now, you said with your second novel, you have kind of reached that point, at least at some point. Did you change your process? Are you outlining for the second book the way that you did for the first book? Why did you reach that sort of low point with it?
Well, I did outline. The reason I reached the low point with it actually came in the second draft when I realized that what I had done to make the story end didn't work right. It didn't work the way I wanted it to. And it was obvious to me in reading it, and it was even more obvious to me when a couple of people who I trust to tell me when I suck said it didn't work. And so then I had to figure out how to make it work. And that took some time. It took some time. I wrote a new beginning, and then I had to do all this connective tissue to what I had, and then I had to wrap it up in a different way. And so, I don't know that it was a low point, but it was a challenge for sure.
And what got you out of that?
Just thinking about it, thinking. I found that thinking from the point of view of the various characters sort of gave me the opening that I needed, and what I needed was a character flaw in one of my two main characters, and once I looked at that character flaw from the right perspective, I saw the way through the story, and so then once I saw it, it was easy enough. But it was mostly just contemplating it.
It's a great segue into a question we've got on the instant message chat. I'm going to tweak this question a little bit, but the question is, if your character jumped out of the book, and here's where I'm tweaking it a little bit, if your character jumped out of the book and was sitting beside you in a cafe, how would they feel about the way you've represented them? Craig?
I think Edward would think that I had done him justice. He probably the hardest part of writing that book, and again, I'll defer to RJ to verify whether or not this is true, but it's a pretty funny book at various junctures, but the trick is because of his condition that he couldn't be the butt of the joke, and that was hard. That was probably the hardest bit of writing, to have his predicament be funny, but not have him be funny. And so, to the extent that he would be able to recognize that, I think that he would appreciate that I never, kicked him when he was down, because it would have been easy to do.
I definitely think he succeeded on that front, because I think a lot of the humor it came from his, very dry observations of everyday life. And here he was the one, struggling with this, with the, OCD and with the Asperger's. And yet it seemed like everyone else around him he definitely had problems of his own, but his dry observations on everybody else's life, I thought, were really where the humor came from. And the fact that their lives were the ones that were more out of control than his. I just thought that you definitely succeeded on that front.
Yeah, one reviewer said that Edward knows he has problems, but he's working on it, and I think that's probably the truest description of him.
So do you approach a character like that? It sounds like with a lot of compassion and love and respect for the character. Are those safe words to? Oh
yeah. I mean, I have to remind myself sometimes he's not real, because he's real to me, and and I care about him a lot. And there was, I'm not gonna give away the ending, but the ending is in its own way very open-ended. But there's, in my mind anyway, there was only one way it could end, and that would be hopefully, and that's, not just what I wanted for him, but it's sort of my own worldview, without hope, then what's the point, So.
That's a great answer. RJ, how about you? What if Tess found your book on a used bookshelf and she read it and said, "Hey, this book is about me"? How would she feel about it?
Well, actually, she sort of did that after I wrote the first draft, and she wasn't very happy with me because I was chickening out and not telling her story honestly. I was almost protecting her and not wanting her to go through the things that really, at her core, that she was, or not exposing, just exactly how flawed she was. And so that's when I went back, and I really stripped it away and made it brutally honest. And I think now if she were to read it again, she'd be a lot happier with me, because I did not chicken out and I told her story honestly. And like Craig, I mean, she's fictional, but you know, she's real to me. So that's sort of how I look at her.
And Heather, how about you? I think it's an interesting question. If she was real and she read this novel, how would she respond to your depiction of her in Fade to Black?
I think she would have one of two reactions. Either she'd be proud of me for doing her justice, or she'd be mad at me for putting her, for getting her attention. Because, like I said earlier, she's in the middle of a lot of issues when Fade to Black begins, and to bring all those issues to light, I'm not so sure how happy she would be with me. I think if I saw her in a cafe somewhere, I would probably get up and run away.
That's a great response. Holly, how about you? In the Nine Lives of Clemenza, there's not really one specific character, and the character is kind of changes through different lives. But what do you think that Clemenza would think of how you've represented her?
I think that, Clemenza's story is really mostly about emotional and personal growth. So I think that she would probably feel a bit exposed, because she has some very private emotions, and some throughout her lives there are some terrible things that happen, and they're the good. She does have a few disappointing lives to her, to where she's disappointed in herself. So I think, above everything else, I think that she would kind of feel exposed about everything. Kind of like whenever you're telling a story about a person that you know, and if that person were to hear you sharing that story, they would kind of think, well, that was way too personal for you to share. That's my story. I feel like she would feel that way. That it was just it's her story of personal growth.
And then finally, let's kind of go around and just talk a little bit about what writing does for you, and what you would be like if you weren't writing. Craig, why don't you start us off? What does writing do for you, and what would you be like if you couldn't write?
The second part of that, I don't even know where to to address that question. I've always written. I've always been involved with the language arts. I always say there aren't too many things that I'm good at, so I wouldn't want you to take this one away, because then I'm pretty much reduced to just sitting on the couch and bitching about popular culture. So so as far as what writing does for me, this is something I always wanted to do. When I was 18 or 19 years old and I was mainlining Hemingway and Steinbeck, I always pictured myself writing, and it took me a long time to come back around to that. I spent my 20s and my middle 30s sort of chasing career goals.
90 seconds.
And now this is something for me to focus my passion on, and there are no goals except that I want to keep creating stories, and I want to keep finding audiences for them. Anything, sales numbers or anything like that, I mean, that's all just too beyond me to even contemplate. So I'm happy at
60
between now and
seconds.
midnight and 3 a.m. when the house is quiet, my wife and the dogs are asleep, and I'm sitting there at my computer and pushing the story along. It's my favorite time of the day.
That's a very poignant image. Heather, how about you? What does writing do for you? And what would you be like if just life intervened and you were unable to write?
Wow, I've been writing for the past 15 years, and I know looking at looking back at work that I've written in the past, that I've worked out a lot of my own problems in my stories that I write. It's like a form of therapy for me, so I don't know what I would do. I'd probably be a nutcase in the corner or something if I didn't have my writing.
10 seconds.
I don't think I'd ever give it up. I thought when I had my son a year ago, I thought I was gonna, have to stop writing. I'm thinking to myself, where am I gonna have to find the time to do this? But I've made time. I refuse to give it up no matter what. It's the world to me, and I hope that I can share that world with everybody else eventually.
And RJ, how about you? What is writing done for you, and what would it be like if you just didn't have the time, or if life intervened and you couldn't write?
Well, it'd be like emotional constipation, then that would not be a good thing. There's been times when, work has, picked up, or, life has happened and I don't get to it as often, and those are not good times. So that's, I don't even want to think about it. But, so I guess, it is. It's an emotional release, definitely. Also, I really, now that I've, had my first book out there, I really enjoy that interaction with readers as well as the emotional release. And I think that is now just as important to me, as the creative part of it. And I'm learning to love that just as much as the creative release as well.
How do you balance the two time-wise?
That is right now my biggest challenge, because it does take so much time and energy to do the marketing and to do it well, the social networking. And I think, over the last probably 3 or 4 months, been spending so much time with the marketing that the writing part has started to suffer. Although Sunday starts November, and I'm going to be doing NaNoWriMo, and it's National Novel Writing Month, and it's basically because I just really need to shut everything else down and just concentrate on the writing. And that's what I'm going to do. I mean, I have to have a certain amount of online presence, but I'm significantly cutting it down just so I can concentrate on the writing, because I don't want to, lose touch with that. And just see where it goes. Hopefully, it's. I feel really confident that it's going to work out really well this month.
I think you'll do great. Holly, how about you? What is writing provided for you, and what would you be like if you were unable to write, or what do you do what happens to you when life is just so overwhelming with work and what have you that you're unable to write?
Whenever I'm overwhelmed with, personal life, I always have looked to writing as an outlet. With exactly what RJ said, she said it was an emotional release, and I think that's definitely exactly what it is for me as well. If I weren't able to write, I would be committed, I think, because I wouldn't be. I would hear these stories in my head. I wouldn't know what was true, what was fiction. I would have no idea what I was doing, and I would definitely be committed in taking a ton of medication.
Well, folks,
That's a bad thing.
Yeah, that would be a bad thing. I love you just the way you are. You've got that bubbly personality. I look forward to chatting every Friday night with you. But I'd hate to see it doped up. We don't need that.
Yeah.
So. Well, for all of us here at Book Chatter, I am your host, Stacy Cochran. I do want to remind folks who are watching that our guests tonight were Craig Lancaster, and he is the author of 600 Hours of Edward. We had Heather Keel on as well, and Heather is the author of Fade to Black. Holly Christine is my co-host, as well as RJ Keller, and RJ is the author of Waiting for Spring, and Holly is the author of The 9 Lives of Clemenza, as well as Retail Ready. So quickly, in 10 seconds or less, what does the future hold for you? Let's do this roundtable. Holly, what does the future hold for you?
What does the future hold for me?
Yes. The next.
I pass. Next question.
Craig, how about you? What is the next, let's say, 2 weeks to 6 months?
Well, I'll be out there pushing again with Edward. and now that he has sort of a new life under a new publisher, and like RJ, I'm launching a new product. Oh man, what a terrible word! I'm a project on Sunday with National Novel Writing Month.
Very cool. And Heather, how about you? What does the next, let's say, 2 weeks to 6 months hold for you?
Well, I too will be participating in National Novel Writing Month. So I think most of my time will be spent working on that and working on what will become my finished product from that. And I think, promoting Fade to Black is also going to be a large part of the next 6 months for me.
And RJ?
Ditto, the writing. I've really got to buckle down, and I think between the writing and the editing, that'll probably be my next 9 months to a year. So I want to get that next book out.
And Holly, did you think of a great closer for us?
Yes, thank you so much. It's been a pleasure as always.
Thank you all for tuning in. I'll be over on the instant message chat for a little while. We'll be back on next week at 11 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, Friday night. Thank you all for tuning in. Have a great night and a great weekend. Happy Halloween, everybody.
Thank you. Good night, guys.
Thank you.
Good night.